I think that what you're doing is something that is unique in any scenes in on the continent. So tell us the story a little bit.
I think what I do in this case, thank you for having this conversation. But what I do is about the need to fill a gap in an existing ecosystem. I feel the journey of Afriart, or my journey in the arts, started when I was in art school. And when I was about to graduate, I couldn't find a place to show my work as an artist. So I started a gallery with a bare need to have a marketplace for my work. And of course, I quickly found out that a gallery, involves so much more than just selling work. So I did show artists that I was studying with and artists who were existing in Kampala, because there were no galleries in Kampala at the time. And as I went on, I started to discover other needs in the art system, the art situation in Kampala. If you know, we have Makerere Art School, the university in Uganda, which was
legendary. Yeah.
But I think the legendness of it ended at some point in I don't know, somewhere in the we had so many wars, so I think the legendness kept dying along the way. And but we have a history of learning art, and we have a history of understanding. We have a history that was not known and was not documented, and nothing much was going on. So as a gallerist at that point, I decided to think about recording. With a few friends, we decided to record, to start a journal which can record art activity in Kampala. And then we went on to, before the Biennale, we thought about a museum, but then we thought a museum would be...
Tell me about that. That's an exciting idea.
Yeah. We were looking at how do we get to the international art market, or international visibility for that matter, and realized that that would require artwork being in museums, because we thought, all great artists, if you think of Elle and whoever, in museum work to, build a serious museum. So we kind of shelved. We then got the journal, start journal, as the archiving process that we would use until when the museum comes about. So at the same time, the idea of international visibility, or visibility for that matter, came to mind, because this is what the museum was supposed to take care of, which was archiving and visibility. So then the Biennale came in as a tool for visibility. We did that for 2 editions of the Biennale with the concern of visibility, but then we also later found out that the issue is not so much visibility. The issue is about artistic development, growth, and understanding of what being an artist is, not only in Uganda, but on the continent, because a lot of artists in Uganda or on the continent make pictures for the tourist market, meaning people who walk into the country and they want maybe a souvenir to take back, and you find a painting of an elephant, a lion, and something, which is not bad in itself, just not so competitive in the critical sense of things, and that means anybody can do it, and that means it's a bit problematic. I don't want to go that side, but what we realize is that there's a real conversation going on in terms of contemporary art from Africa, contemporary art from Africans, or from Black people, or for people from the continent of Africa. But the same conversation is at the same table with the art from China, art from South America, art from Europe, art from everywhere in the world. And this was going on in places like Venice Biennale, where this kind of conversations happen. So I thought that this is a moment to really go there, you know, and figure out what this whole thing is made up of. So a lot of my activity in the arts is a response to a discovery that is missing in the way we do things and what we do. So that's how my journey kind of is in the arts.
What strikes me very clearly, and which I think it's quite common to a lot of us in this field and of this particular generation of ours, of people who invest in art, is that many of us, including you, as you say, act out of a point of urgency and necessity, you know. That's one layer. The other layer that strikes me also is the very fact that like Uganda, which has quite a reputation through the Makerere Art School, and if you compare it, for instance, with Dakar, which had quite a reputation also through all the Senghorian utopias, we still found ourselves in the 90s in a situation where available was not sufficient or was not necessarily conducive, you know, to growing an artistic career, developing an independent institutional framework, so to speak. So I think it's quite determining, and it's one of the characteristics that I see throughout the last 20 years. We start initiatives because the environment doesn't provide for what we need at those specific times.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that we want something and we get it. I think that's somehow what it is. When you think about governments and support for art, there is so much for them to support at the moment. There is infrastructure and sometimes self-wealth creation or something like that. But that by the time it comes to art, and if you notice in Africa here, when you studied art or music for that matter, you were going to be the disgrace of that particular family. So a lot of our history, our parents, at least my generation, they never allowed us to do this kind of work. Of course, for me, my circumstances were different. I didn't have both parents at the time when I studied, so I kind of made the decision myself. And even today, you know, it's not like people in society are saying, "Oh, that guy is great, is an artist." It's not how we look at things. So, but we know it's like a conviction. It's like being born again. You know, like finding God or whatever that is. That is the kind of spirit that I have when I do.
It poses the question of what kind of cultural policies, you know, our governments have, because there is such a huge gap between, you know, what I call eventities, so to speak, you know, one event after the other, which are very important, which are very structural, which bring people together, well, knowing that our mobility now for the next year or so is will be limited. But what I want to say is that um, uh, initiatives and organizations that work on a daily basis, you know, that work beyond the idea of an event, are necessary, are so necessary that, and they are so little available that, you know, people like you and others, you know, invest privately to make it happen, which really poses the question. So my question to you, what are the cultural policies in Uganda now that after almost 20 years that you've been active, started the gallery, launched a very successful biennial, which I hope that I will visit, launched the journal, growing a steady group of young emerging artists going to art fairs. Have you built a certain traction with the government? Do they recognize your contribution to the artistic and intellectual ecosystem, Kampala?
I have, there's no time. It has to be done now. But there is a question of of engagement with government. I have tried through the biennial to talk to government as a partner to, you know, to join. And culture is we don't have a Ministry of Culture in Uganda. So we have a Ministry of Gender, Youth and Youth Development, something like that. Women and Gender, Youth and Development. So, and in there's a subsection of culture, which means that the concern, when we talk about culture in the Ugandan government point, we are talking about the traditional dances and tribes and dressing, and that is culture. But there is so when you engage with government at that point, you're dealing with that culture. But the contemporary culture, the culture of today is, and you look even in music in Uganda, it is handled very by private entities. I think for music, there has been government involvement with the musicians as a tool to you know, to campaign or to win votes or to get closer to the youth because of its, you know. So we have a really big struggle when it comes to working with government. But also my personal experience is that I don't know whether I want to work with government at this moment because of the bureaucracy, because they will slow me down, or it will not be fun for me anymore. So it becomes a big question on how I don't think I will be the one to do that. I think if they can, if I worked with government, they will have to do it sort of on my terms, maybe based on my experience, because we have to be talking about the right thing. We cannot talk about the politics of a country when we're talking about, you know, the global cultural politics of what I guess we are trying to deal with. Yeah.
I guess I want to touch on the fact that as much as, you know, we are invested in these, you know, institutions, organizations that we create and that we feed into, and we have quite dysfunctional public sphere, I mean, public governmental system. It also some kind of a part of our work to do some education to them, you know. I think that some of us, like if I take, for instance, Douala Art in Cameroon, they have succeeded to educate the government in a certain way after 30 years, you know. So I strongly believe that, of course, it takes time, and it shouldn't actually take time, but this is what we have to deal with. So when I started RAW many years ago, I was also in the same position, away from government, because they waste your time through bureaucracy, and what you really get out of them is not necessarily what you need. But at the same time, I believe that we cannot continue, you know, working in conditions that we have to work in, whereas infrastructure and support could be made available by the public bodies. So it is very important to engage them in that conversation. So, for instance, yeah, go ahead, please.
I agree with you, and you know, I hear you, and I wish for a moment where, you know, I spend a lot of my time being busy with whatever I do, that I long for moments where I am not, and therefore create some strategy on how I can influence government. Of course, with now what we are doing, there's a lot of, we are hoping of some kind of conversation or existence, but there is no permanent people in government. Like when you talk about Senegal, you have Senghor as the president, who, you know, if you had their ear, it could trickle down, and I think hence the Dakar Biennale and so on and so forth. So it doesn't matter what happens after in Senegal. There was a moment when the head made that possible. When you look at Cameroon, you look at, I would say, the Francophone influence, maybe. I don't know much about Cameroon in itself, but the Francophone influence stayed, in terms of culture and art, stayed in Francophone Africa till today, that institutions still exist. The Anglophone Africa left when the child called Africa was, like Uganda, was saying, go away, I don't want you. They left the child and somehow went away and never came back in a cultural sense. Maybe in a political sense, yes, but not a cultural sense. So for me in Uganda, the difficulty, and I think Kenya probably has the same problem, or even Nigeria, is that it's hard to know who to engage in order to make the impact on a government level. It is a continuous thing for me, and a quest that I'm onto. I just hope that I find it. I really hope I find it, because I'd like to make that connection.
Yeah. And I just want to tell everybody who's listening to us that if you have any questions, please post them in, because it will be very difficult for us to scroll down the list of people and comments to find the questions. So if you have a question, post them. There is a system to do that. After feeding the scene for almost 20 years, Daudi, there are, I think that I strongly believe in context, and I strongly believe in learning from your context and getting insight from your context that informs your work. You have applied quite different methods and systems of, contextualizing and providing a platform and putting out voices out there from Uganda. What's another thing that strikes me is that you run a commercial gallery, which is the market space needed, and you run a biennial, which is the kind of non-market critical space. Anywhere else, people would say you can't do that at the same time. So the context of Kampala, what compelled you to really break down that wall between market and critical space and run the both initiatives at the same time without any, I mean, I think totally unapologetically, which I totally admire.
Yeah. I think that comes from myself being an artist. I think this host who is well written about, who is who exists in biennials and you know, so a lot of I think the things that I do are because of who I wanted to be or want to be or what I would like to see. It is very personal. From a lot of my people who see the way I work with the gallery, which is a commercial gallery, sometimes say you're not so aggressive because, you know, I believe in good quality artworks, and because of that, they get sold. So the money is made, but I don't go out of my way to, you know, push the envelope to get a sale made or something. But somehow it has happened that we sell very well and we do very well. Now, when it comes to the Biennale, it's like I feel like the country needs this. The world, the continent needs these activities. Art must be seen on this continent. This business of showing art in Europe, African art in Europe, is, I think it should be a very, it should be something that inspires, like it should be a moment, because it should have more of these events, like I like the Lagos Art Fair and all this, and you know, the activities in Cape Town and South Africa and Morocco and so on. It's like I feel like things have to happen on this continent. It's like a thing in myself. So I guess I can take off hats and switch them based on the need. But I think all of the things that I do, why I don't conflict with them is because I want to see this, and nobody said that somebody else gives it to you, but you give it to yourself. So I do it. And I also know that if I fail, you know, nobody sent me to do it in the first place. So no one is going to tell me to bring back his whatever. So I just keep doing. And it's the
failure is not an
I'm not from mainstream.
You know that.
Well, it is. I think we can get whatever we want, and I think I would speak more for the African on the continent. Is that we've grown up to believe that we are given things, that we cannot do something because we were not picked or selected, or we were not, you know. I was talking to a friend this evening about the question of the campaign in the US about the Black community, and I was saying, you know, it's time for African Americans in America to say to refuse to be discriminated, you know, like not like to take it, to refuse, because somehow when you look at this story, some people are discriminating against others, and somehow it's like they're giving them the right to either choose to or not to choose. Like I feel like we have to choose and decide and want and get. If we fail, at least we tried. You know?
Well, I mean, you're touching on a point that is very rage since many weeks, and but I beg to disagree with you very vehemently. I mean, when you suggest that African Americans are just accepting the very fact that over
No,
400
no,
years there has
no, they are
been
not accepting.
fights, very very serious fights,
No,
and I even believe that the struggle for equality and civic rights in the US has very much infused and inspired African liberations movements in the 50s, you know. So I don't think I totally disagree, because one has to really commend the resilience of African American culture and African Americans in the US in a context that can only be described as, you know, humanly savage in a way. Whiteness and white supremacy is performing in that country. So bringing it back to us and to our conversation in a big leap, um, I, I definitely believe that one has to claim, or, you know, occupy space and elevate a voice, and, you know, create a place from where to talk and from where to act. Absolutely, definitely, you know. In French, you say la nature a peur, a horreur du vide. That since void is not an option, so to speak. So, yes. What do you think about that?
I respect the struggle of the African American, just so you know, more than you can imagine. And being an African, I feel there's too much. It's just, I can't, we don't even have to talk about it, because
No.
I'm on the right side. But when we come back to these platforms, I think when you come to Africa and when we come to Africans doing things, it could be, I don't know, technology, IT, or it could be visual art, it could be music, it could be whatever, business. I think that we wait in Africa, we wait too much. We wait for the thing to happen, for somebody to do the thing. We wait. And waiting might be a good thing or not. But for me, I think if we should not be given, we should take. We should create the platforms. We should try to do that. If we don't, if we fail to do, we try and we fail, it's better than not trying. And I think it's an opportunity that I think drives me, but also is something that I think more Africans should do in the arts, especially. When I look at the visual arts, when I look at the young artists that write me every day on my Instagram or my email or something, asking, oh, you know, can I work with you? Can I?
I agree on the level that there is definitely so much work out there in terms of practice, you know, that the scarcity of organizations and institutions and body that can sort of, you know, accommodate or take up that work and bring it, you know, build a career for the artists are definitely not enough, you know. The fact that there is one Afriart in Kampala, that there is one here, one there, it's definitely not enough, you know. That, and I've always been a strong advocate, not of plurality or of multiplicity, and of also, you know, the more the better, so to speak. But at the same time, I also believe that it is very, very important for us to to really understand our context and to really, try to respond to it and not work kind of in a bubble. So you mentioned earlier that you started the gallery, basically, I mean, mainly you started the biennial for international visibility and for creating a platform where great art, great events can happen in Uganda, and contributing to the number of possibilities on the continent. We are experiencing in the last, let's say, 10 years, a kind of a recrudescence, a kind of a heightened interest and curiosity and also appetite of what we do. How has it been translating to you? Particularly what I hear from a lot of galleries on the continent is that you go through the very long work of, building young artists and building their careers. And then all of a sudden, the Perotens of this world come and pick and leave. So have you have experiences like that? How does it work? What kind of relationship do you build with the artists that you work with? How does it play out for you?
It's I think the work that we have to do. I do a lot of work in this case, in this system, identifying artists and working with them and helping them see what it is that they can do, and some of them it is very successful, some maybe not, but whatever we do, they get out. Of course, the very successful ones, the moment I show them anywhere in an international platform, the next minute is, I don't know, people writing them, asking to represent them from America to Europe to everywhere. And some of them will say, talk to my gallery, but some might say, what do you have? And some,
and that's where
the problem
and that's where I'm sorry to interrupt you. That's why my question is, because that's also where the education is important, because
yes,
most of the artists don't know, they see opportunities,
exactly, yeah,
and the jump on the
yeah,
opportunities. Fair enough, So that's
yeah,
why I'm asking about what
it's
kind
true.
of relationship do you build with them, not only to build their practice and their careers, but also to educate them about the system,
Yeah. So we recently, we used to do it on a very not a structured way, but we recently started a residency program, but it's more of an artist development program. It not only shows them, it's not only technical in terms of how to make art practice, but it's more about also how to be a professional, the relation between a gallerist and an artist. What a gallery can do for an artist, and how far an artist can go alone, or how far they can go with a gallery if the gallery and the artist have a good relation. So I would say that recently, all the artists that I work with now, that have gone through this system, they understand what it is to be with a gallery and the relationship between the two of us. And my key theories and philosophies at the moment about what the number one that I tell all my staff is about the quality of our relationship with the artist. It has to be fair, it has to be filled with integrity, it has to be very transparent. We have to wish each other very well so that we can both grow. Because if it's like a relationship, it's like a love relationship. You have to love each other. That's the thing with
the
integrity. And
the integrity is important. I'm curious I would like you to tell us a little bit about, I mean, the gallery is now almost 20 years old. And you mentioned that you started it to provide more visibility to the artists that you work with. What about the local collectors base? Because I know you go to art fairs very regularly, but I'm curious to hear about, you know, the local collector base of Uganda, of Kampala. Who are the people who acquire art in Kampala, or how do you build that base?
Today, so the history of Ugandans collecting art, you know, it happened 20 years ago or so. Before, we had Ugandan collectors, mostly the middle class. They would buy whatever, you know, there were lawyers, there were business people, private, and that all kind of died because of these, I think, wars. People leave the country, people become broke or whatever, or they focus on other things. So recently, Uganda has been stable for 30-something years, and recently we've got a middle class emerging. And so about 5-6 years ago, I started talking to some of the Ugandans who were buying art from the gallery. They were buying for whatever the reason, because they could. I started going through with them a process of art and collecting art and the value of collecting art. And the number is not so big. Maybe I have about 15 Ugandans that I've been working with for the last 5 years. Yes, but the 15 is, I'm so proud of it. Who are collecting, who are attending, hope to make it public. But it's not only buying art. We support art and artists and promote art and collections and the investment of art. So it's like but we also speak with collectors in Nigeria, and we speak with collectors, you know, in South Africa, African collectors, as a way to share knowledge, but also to understand what it is that we do. So I would say that for that we are moving in a very good direction, and it's you add one person a year or so, but it's very good.
That is crucial. It's incredible. I have the feeling that we've been talking for 15 minutes, but it's almost already 45 minutes. And there is a question here that from Isabel El Hassan. Where do you think the waiting mentality comes from? Not feeling empowered to do things by yourself. That's one question. And we have another question from Andrea Blum-Ur. I wonder, oh my God, I'm too old. This is written too small. I can't read this. I wonder what would success be? Is it limited to a commercial outcome, exhibit in Europe? How important is the impact of the artistic practice? I hope I got this right. Did you hear me?
Okay. Daudi? Yeah. Could somebody place that image, that question on the screen? And I think you're saying, what is success for me? I think as an artist, for me, I think it's making art from your soul, from the deepest point of view, in a way that when it is received by whoever looks at it, they will feel it, they will be affected by it, either art or emotionally affected. And I say that the more people are affected by an artist's work, one of those people is going to say, how much is it? I like to buy it. So success to me in an artwork is not the selling of the work. It is how many people love it, how many people feel connected to that particular artwork. So I like to tell artists to really find that art in themselves. Some people die without, some artists die without finding that point of, and when we look at all the great artists that we like, that's why there's millions of artists, but there's only few that everybody runs to, because they find that place, that thing in them that makes them very special. It's hard to find, but when one finds it, that place, that success you're looking for. But
I mean, I have my own kind of take on success, because there are multiple types of success. You know, I mean, a lot of people understand success as financial success, so to speak, and as much as I strongly believe that financial success is also very important for artists, because I mean, it's something that also, you know, can sort of push you, provide you a livelihood. And I am absolutely not adept to the idea that an artist has to sort of suffer, you know, this kind of, I think, reactionary thing that a lot of people still believe in. I think that an artist is just another contributor to society, just like a lawyer, a banker, or, you know, whoever, a doctor. And we have to have systems in our societies for these very important spiritual workers, as I call them sometimes, to thrive through their craft, through their work. But at the same time, I also think that many artists that we might deal with don't really abstract the concept and the very notion of success, because there are many artists who, as you say, don't necessarily have commercial success, but they have critical success, they have practice success, which I think is very important. So it is a matter, it's not either or. I always believe that we are so multiple and we have multiple needs. And as an artist, particularly, one of the, I'm not an artist, but from the perspective of an artist, I believe that one of the very core fundamental thing is the possibility and the space to, you know, engender those works and make them with the public, and of course eventually get some you know, financial success about it. And financial success is really, you know, I strongly believe that too many artists, not only in Africa, worldwide, too many artists struggle too much, you know, and always have to sort of defend themselves or justify themselves in order to be embedded in a system that provides them decent livelihood. So success is multiple. The other question that came up is that the idea of waiting. Why do you think? Because you said that people wait too much to make to do initiatives. So, and why is it a waiting thing? Where do you think the waiting mentality comes from? Not feeling empowered to do things by yourself. First of all, I don't agree with you, just to respond. I don't agree with you that there is a waiting mentality. I totally don't, because of all African societies that I know and that I regularly visit, I really believe that there is so much initiative in all fields of life. You know, people don't wait. You know, life is anyway for most of us so challenging that waiting is not an option. You have to get up and look for life, be it as an artist, be it as an engineer, be it as whatever. So I don't believe that. So maybe you can tell me why you think that we have the waiting mentality. I don't agree with that.
I think that wait, you know, like if you're a business person, somebody will say that in order to start a business, you must have money, something like that. So if you don't have the money, then you're not going to do the business. So people tend to wait for the opportunity to get the right person, the right. Like if Daudi, myself, I waited for the gallery, to come
Daudi, we
before I
have
can start my career.
30 seconds left. I'm sorry to interrupt. We have 30 seconds left, and we cannot extend this. I think we touch on very essential points, and I'm very happy that we disagree on some. There is a next Instagram live from Zeitz MOCAA next week.